Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to take place in the 39th chapter in the book of Job. This is the second chapter of Yahweh's first discourse. Hitherto, the 38th chapter, we've heard from a lot of human beings. Job, the human protagonist of the book, not the author, but also four people he debates with, and then fittingly enough they're all struggling to make sense about why what happened to Job happened. He lost everything in the twinkle of an eye. He was an upright man who eschewed evil. Nevertheless, evil was visited upon him to devastating extent, and they struggle to make sense of this, and they exchange theology in the course of their musings, their monologues, and their debate. But it is only fitting and appropriate that Yahweh get the final word, because they're talking about him and he's watching the entire time. In Job, one of his most frequent and fervent prayers is for an audience, and he develops a full confidence that he would know what to say in such a situation. But the situation unfolds in a direction altogether unanticipated by Job. Job doesn't ask the questions. He asks a series of rhetorical questions, of which there are no easy answers to demonstrate Job's ignorance and his limited knowledge, not only him, but also his friends. Eventually, he upholds Job. He vindicates him for having done nothing to deserve it. He was a righteous man, but he doesn't offer him an explanation. He gives him a promise, a twofold restoration of his wealth and property and the same number of children that he had. But he just argues very much from the vantage point of might makes right. So he is sovereign and he is omnipotent, and there is a law of fairness which we recognize that, the world clearly distorts and corrupts. But we also hold God. It is erroneous to hold God to our standard of justice, because he is sovereign, but he is capable of intervening to equal any score on this life. But that's he's saving it all for the end, and but he is not at our beck and call, although he does deign to condescend in the form of a whirlwind to settle Job's dilemma, and Job is ultimately improved by the experience of what he went through. But from the 38th chapter, now in his first discourse, he argues about Job's inability to explain creation, with the attendant inference being that if you cannot explain the way that the universe works, or my earth, or everything on it or in it, then who are you to question the way that I govern my moral universe? So he asks a series of questions. They begin cosmological, the foundation of the earth, taking it back to creation itself, the seas and everything on the earth. Then it gets meteorological in the 22nd verse of the 41 verse chapter, of which we're going to review. One of the questions is, where is the way that the light is divided, or the east wind scattereth over the earth? The light has a definite point of origin, and it was spoken into existence. Genesis 1:3, he said, let there be light, and it was good. But we're human beings, we do not know these things. The science, even the as much. Now, the author of Job is writing to a pre-scientific people, but the point is, just because we can know these things now doesn't mean we know. It also demonstrates the limitations of our knowledge. The east wind, where does it come from? We know it comes from the east, but where does it come from more specifically? What is the cause of its effect? And it is set in motion naturally by a supernatural force. Verse 28, does the rain have a father, or who has brought forth drops of dew? The father means the originator of, so he is the cause which moves rain. He created the laws of physics, according to which water rains on the earth and is evaporated into clouds and replenishes itself and rejuvenates it once more. So he is also likened to a maternal role in the next verse for the ice. And the drops of dew, this just would have been the pleasant basking blessings of springtime. From whose womb comes the ice, and who gave birth to the frost of the heaven? The womb is the reference point, likened to a child coming out of a womb, so he is the originator, and he created ice. And one of the miraculous things about it just goes to show how clever and creative he is that ice, even though it is solid, it is less dense than water. That is why ice floats on surface bodies of water. But that's because he made it the way he made it, and who but God could do that? Who is Job to even presume? Who are any of us to even presume? We do not know the infinitesimal fraction. We have not even scratched the surface of everything that can be known. And these just meteorological phenomenons that lay beyond our ability to comprehend, far less control, are just a reminder that we are finite, we are mortal, we are frail, we are limited, and he is being spoken to by an unlimited deity. Verse 33, do you know the laws of the heavens, or do you apply their rule over the earth? He is governor, creator, and controller of the heaven and the earth. The physical motions and mechanics and the seasons and just the sun and the moon rising every day. That's all part of his creation, his design, his creative prowess and magnificence, and just a wisdom of a reflection and a window into the wisdom of his mind. But who among us, we can know the laws of physics, not perfectly or thoroughly or totally. Certainly there are some scientists who do have indeed admittedly impressive knowledge into the laws of physics, but they can never know everything there is to know about that subject, far less everything else there is to know in the universe, and just applying it over the earth. So he created the heavens and the earth, so the reflection of the heaven and earth is encapsulated in this sentence. His rule and dominion springs from the heaven, and it does affect the earth. Who has put wisdom in the inward parts, or who has given understanding to the heart? He is the origin of all wisdom. He is an omniscient being that is the attribute of infinite or unlimited intelligence. That means we cannot teach him anything, any item of information he does not already know, because his knowledge is already perfect and as such impervious to degeneration and incapable of improvement. To have any allowance or room for improvement would admit some imperfection there. So he is, now there is no wisdom apart from people, and God is a person, not in the sense that he is a human, but he is a person in the sense that he has a mind that thinks, a heart that feels, and a will that acts. So wisdom can be experienced in it, and the fundamental assumption of theological wisdom literature is that the wisdom comes from the fear of Yahweh. This is expressed in Job 28th chapter, also Proverbs, and some of the wisdom psalms. So that relationship between God and wisdom is closely connected in Old Testament wisdom literature. Then he transitions into, in the 39th and 41st verse, he speaks of lions and ravens respectively. So he proceeds in the 39th chapter, he goes from, remember, the cosmological realm to the meteorological to the animal, the life on earth realm. And so Job does not hunt the prey for the lions, and who provides food for the ravens, and Yahweh also provided food for his prophet Elijah through the mouth of a raven. So that's just another expression of his sovereign control. First verse, 39th chapter. Do you know the time when the wild mountain goats bear young, or do you observe when the deer give birth? Wild mountain goats or deer are animals in nature. They are not domesticated animals, so we can know scientifically. We do have some knowledge, certainly in our scientific age, of how long they take to, how long a deer stays pregnant for, but, Job could not possibly know that, and none of us knows all of these things, and even if we do not know everything. So these questions are not arbitrary. They are just reminders of his omnipotence and perfections, and the attendant there being no room to question the wisdom of his moral order. I know it stings a lot of times when much that is unfair flourishes on the earth, but this is what makes faith necessary. Do you number the months they complete, or do you know the time when they bear young? There's a seasonal cycle according to which every animal, every reproductive life form, in the spring, everything rejuvenates. That's the time when they give. But with the matter of bears hibernate in the winter, so they have lives that are oriented around the months as much as we do, but we do not pay attention because we're so wrapped up in our own affairs that we do not take the time to empathize with animals, because humans are a self-centered creature, and as animals we are geared to our own survival, so this self-centeredness exacerbates by the reality of being geared towards our own survival. But we do not know the time when we don't know how long it takes for a deer. Some scientists do, but I personally don't know. I couldn't answer that off the top of my head. So trying to put myself in Job's shoes, we would have no answer for these things. They bow down, they bring forth their young, their labor pains are ended. Impregnation is the process of natural birth not only for humans but also for animals. And one of the attendant consequences of the fall was the curse that was pronounced on all females to henceforth bring all their babies into birth with pain. But it is true for the animals. They too suffer from labor pains. The process of giving birth is not a pleasant matter, but the joy which is the immediate after effect of it, just makes the pain just instantly vanish. This is communicated in passages such as John 16:21. But we do not know we have no insight or awareness into the life or the mind or the movements of a deer unless we made it our life's work to do that. But that is just another reminder of how limited we are. We could not dedicate our lives to doing all the things that would be necessary to answer these questions. First off, we'd be equally dumbstruck by the awesome, majestic, splendorous presence of Yahweh condescending in the form of a whirlwind. We would be tongue-tied and we could not answer him, such as what Job does at the conclusion of this discourse. He acknowledges that his own ignorance, his own inadequacy, his own incompleteness, and he repents in the dust and the ashes. Their young ones are thriving. They grow up in the field. They shall leave and not return to them. Now, the young ones thrive through paternal and maternal protection. The ministry of a mother in any animal life form is to give birth to the young and to see that they live strong enough to make it on their own. Then they grow in the field. They go out, wherever deer are, the mountains, the field. They're literally all over the place. But there is a definite point in animal life when they leave to not return to their mothers. And this reminds us of the Edenic call for marriage, when a man shall depart his mother and father who gave him life to marry a wife and bring life. That is why he leaves. But, it's a good general practice to stay in contact with your parents even if you are married. Who let the wild donkeys free? Who loosed the bonds of the wild donkey? The wild donkey is distinct from the domesticated breed, and the donkey that is domesticated may have been wild at one point, but there are such donkeys that are so not worth it to even try to tame that they are best left run wild. So these are donkeys with more rambunctious personalities than that which we can control and domesticate. But where did they get the steps of their life to run the fields that they do? Why are they so rambunctious? Who instilled that nature in them? Who is the architect of all life form? Not just ourselves and not just our species, but also all the animals, all the life, all the plant form, all the bacteria, all the stuff that we don't even know the surface of. Whose home as I have made in the desert, in the salt land his dwelling. I'm a little confused because wilderness typically translates as desert in this, so that may be the more lush forest field, and by the reversal of that that the deer goes to and springs around. But the salt land, certain life forms do flourish around salt land. Salt is preservative, but it also kills certain. It's not a habitable. Where there is salt, there is not a lot of room or habitation for life forms. He laughs at the commotion of the city. He does not hear the shouts of the driver. This is still talking about the wild donkey who, all the commotion of the city, the noise that human cities and human activity must emanate in nature must frighten some animals, but not this one. He laughs right at it. He looks it square in the eye and says, "Come and get me. I'm more wild than you are civilized. I'll take you on right here and right now." But he will not respond. He will not be domesticated because he does not want to be domesticated. It's in his nature to be wild and run free and do all the things that he does, love, just not have a master, be its own master, its own life form. So he will not submit because that is his nature to be wild. And the reason that he is wild is because God made him to be wild. It's all part of his wise design, the intricacies of which we can only scratch the surface in explaining. The range of the mountains is his pasture, and he searches for all that is green. Pasture is where animal life forms, deer, all these things, sheep, they need pasture, they need field to roam and grass to eat, and green, all these things. So, but this is still talking about the undomesticated wild donkey. So he still has a pasture, and he still moves to all that is green, just as any animal life form, any vegetarian life form. So we can imagine that the wild donkey feeds on green. Would the wild ox be pleased to serve you, or spend the night by your feeding trough? The wild ox was rare in its day, and it is since extinct. This is the third strongest mammal life form that walks the earth, next to elephants and rhinoceroses, the once untamed but now extinct. Just imagine an ox that was too strong to be domesticated. That is a wild ox. They are no longer with us. But just to give the perspective on an elephant, I earlier said the largest mammal life form. That is, in fact, the blue whale. And to give it perspective, the elephant is the size of a blue whale's tongue. These things are 100 feet long. Elephants are 11 feet tall. But where was it? Where was it? To spend. But would the wild ox be pleased to serve you, or spend the night? Spend the night by your feeding trough. So, are you able to domesticate this wild ox, this beast which resists and rebels against any attempted usurpation of its right to roam on its own wild natural inclinations? Can you tame him? He is under the command and control of the one who gave him life. He roams by his grace and his sovereign permission. But what human can get one of these wild oxes? So there are beasts and natures that cannot be tamed, but no beast more potent than the human tongue, which is a world of fire, as described in the 3rd chapter of James. If you bind the wild ox in the furrow with ropes, would he plow the valleys behind you? This is a rhetorical question. It cannot be done because a wild ox cannot be tamed by the machinations or the inventions of man. We cannot tame it as we would an ordinary ox. It's just going to bust through and break free. But, we could not domesticate it or turn it or convert it to a productive service or purpose. But God can do that, and without him, we are at the mercy of the life form which is superior in strength than us. We do not want to be a ruin alone with the wild ox, even though they are no longer here. Would you rely on his great strength, or would you leave your labor to him? To be able to rely and utilize the strength of an ox, a domesticated ox, is a tremendously strong and powerful beast of burden that can just have loads on its shoulder. But we cannot. A wild ox, contrarily, cannot be controlled, cannot be domesticated, cannot be reduced to submission. So its strength is in its own service, and we cannot utilize it for our advantage. It is not at our disposal because we cannot tame what we cannot control. So, of course, we would leave the labor to him ourselves. or man. We would have to do what a beast was designed to do, and that's just a reminder of our limitations. Would you trust him to bring home your grain and gather it to your threshing floor? This is something that even a domesticated box does not ordinarily do. Going to the market, engaging in commerce, but he's talking about bringing the grain from one destination and location on the farm to the next. And could you tame such a one who is by its nature untamable? This is just a reminder that there are elements in nature that we cannot control. They are in the sovereign command and control and creation of their creator and master and sovereign. So all these things, he eventually proceeds to talk about birds, and he ceases asking questions after the 12th chapter. He just gives some observations and musings all the way up till the 18th verse. The wings of the ostrich flap joyously, but they are not the pinions and pilgrimage of a stork. Ostriches and storks are two distinct categories of bird, two different species, two different natures, two different physical functions. I think an ostrich cannot fly like a stork can. A stork can soar over the earth. An ostrich is still a bird, but it is unable to fly. It has the wings, and it's a fast runner, but it is naturally incapable and not ordained or anointed to fly, to soar the sky, but the stork is. She leaves her eggs on the ground and warms them in the dust. Now, most birds that can fly, they lay their nest in the trees, so no non-flying animal can get to them or tamper them. But the ostrich leaves it right on the ground, and this is actually a lure, a creative lure. That's how, because certain predators, they feed on the babies and the young, and in fact the species which wiped out the dinosaurs were the early little rats. They ate the young of the dinosaurs, but an ostrich has a mind on them. They are never far away. They're just making it seem like they're not there to lure them in. She leaves her eggs on the ground and acts like she's not there, but she in fact is. This is the mother, the female protector. And she forgets that a foot might crush them or a wild beast tread on them. So birds are not intelligent creatures. They have, brains slightly larger than the peanut. So this bird doesn't even know that a foot could crush them. But, God has his sovereign providential oversight over nature. And even though a wild beast could tread on them, that is not something that ordinarily occurs in the passage and the season and cycles of nature. So he does protect certain species from the destructive consequences of their own stupidity. He treats her young harshly, as if not hers. Her toil is in vain, without fear. Now, mothers, the maternal instinct is to treat tenderly, lovingly, and compassionately that which belongs to you, that which came out of you. But the ostrich is different. They are not friendly creatures even to their young ones. They treat them harshly, but they do survive, and that's what's necessary in order to them to do so. But because Eloah has made her forget wisdom and did not endow her with understanding. So Yahweh is referring to himself in the singular person. That's what Eloah means. It's distinct from Elohim. But all wisdom comes and emanates from him. I think we discussed that in the 36th verse of the previous chapter. But some animal life forms aren't intelligent, and it wouldn't be if not for the designs of nature that they would survive, if not for the wise one who was creative enough to conceive this plan and powerful enough to put it in motion. But they do all these things and survive in spite of themselves, because Yahweh, who is wise, protects fools, as the old adage goes. When she lifts herself on high, she laughs at the horse and its rider. This is a brash, confident, confrontational bird. It does not literally laugh. Laughing is not something animals can do, but it does have the mocking condescension of superiority. It just brushes off. When she's starting to run, this is a way of saying that the ostrich is faster than a horse. A horse can go 45 miles an hour, but an ostrich can go even faster. Of course, it is faster. The aerodynamics of the air makes travel by air faster. So the ostrich is not some birds can fly 200 miles an hour, but an ostrich is at least able to outrun a horse. That's all the time we have for today. The questions do resume in the 19th verse, and there's 12 verses left. We'll save this for another time. That's all we have time for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.